Thank you, everyone. And just confession first time is, I've only got 15 slides to go, so I'm going to try and keep it brief. And the other side is I'm going to talk in past tense. Main reason for that is what we're sharing with you today is more about what we've been doing and some of the patterns and behavior in terms of Internet of Things and the experience that has come out of it. I've got one slide to go, which is more marketing, just to give you an introduction of the breadth and the scale of what we're really talking about from an Oakton point of view, because some of you might think, who's Oakton, and never heard of them before, which is quite normal. So just to set the context, Oakton's been around for 25 odd years in Australia. We predominantly focus on business and application consulting. That's just been our core concept. We're around 1,300 people, Australia-wide across the eastern seaboard and all those kind of scenarios. And we got an offshore development center. So some of the case studies that I'm going to share are based on Oakton experience in Internet of Things and how we've helped a couple of our customers in Australia to leverage the IoT scenario. The other aspect is around November timeframe. Oakton got acquired by Dimension Data. For those of you who may not know, Dimension Data is around $6.5 billion in revenue globally. We're one of the infrastructure powerhouses, cover everything from infrastructure, cloud, and all those scenarios. I've got quite an extensive experience in this IoT space, having done quite a bit of work, which I'm going to share. Some of that is in terms of how we've helped, and there's a couple of case studies in terms of when we're happy to show you how these things work, rather than, so that's why my whole proposition is going to be in past tense. The other part of this is Dimension Data in itself is a wholly owned subsidiary of NTT. It's a Japanese telecommunication company. Malcolm raised the point as how important internet has become. Quite a significant part of internet flows through NTT's network. So it's just, that's the kind of where we're talking about from a scale point of view, and the size matter and the breadth of coverage. So when you look at the whole Internet of Things and what is required in order to be able to do it, you do need that breadth from a business consulting point of view, all the way from a technology to network and utility perspective, to actually bring all the parts together. So the scenario with most of the IoT case studies we're going to take you through is in terms of those kind of examples, is how do you actually bring and how do you actually deliver real business value in these things. I'm not going to talk about specific technology sets in terms of how do you actually string one device into the others and all those kind of scenarios. We'll be very much focused on having done that so what question, which is what everyone comes up with. Like, great, so what, big deal. And I'm going to start with a very simple proposition. My proposition is, as it stands today with the whole Internet of Things technologies, it is possible to leverage this to actually deliver exceptional citizen services. For all the people who are coming from the public sector today, the technology is available today as it stands for you to drive down the cost of service while improving your satisfaction with your citizens. And that's where we are. And this is, to a large extent, has been happening for a long time. It's just been happening in different pockets. It is coming to emergence now. And it's heartening to see. It's like, talk about Internet of Things as a technology set and having a room full of people. And with standing room only earlier, it doesn't happen very often. So there is a magic to it, there is a power behind it, but it is something, is what I would rather say is a solved problem space. And as we're going through this, it's more about sharing some of those stories and how they come together. We've seen today in terms of a lot of the space that we've gone through, in terms of there's a lot of hype and technologies, jargons, and words that get used. And I have a technology problem. Excellent. So very effectively we are, just before lunch, is kind of, I was trying to use a soup analogy. We get this whole, exposed out to all these different technologies, said smart this, smart that, RFID and all that. All it does is it just creates a literal alphabet soup for us to digest. And it does cause a whole heap of confusion from that point of view is, what am I going to do with all these things and all these technology sets that I get exposed to day in and day out? how do they all come together? What does that actually mean in terms of, if I'm saying the proposition is that you can actually drive down the cost of service while improving the satisfaction, how do any of these things come together to deliver those things? And it's the important thing with most of these kind of scenario is to actually understand the ecosystem in terms of how they play. And we come with a proposition, it's good to start small and grow, but with a planned approach on how you would do that. So in that concept is, we have this concept called a digital fabric. The concept of the digital fabric is really an integrated platform. It's not integrated platform in terms of, you're buying it from one vendor and all that. Most heartening thing for me to see today was earlier conversations around having to define your architecture and have it standards-based first. Because if you don't do that, all you would end up doing is buying lots of things which none of them talk to each other, and you will end up in a mess further down the path. The other side is with most of the, with money being tight in Australia across most of the government services, you can't really launch a multi-billion-dollar transformation program and have all these things done. So your evolution in some respect is going to be slow. It's going to be incremental. It's going to be step by step. If that's the case, you do need to be very clear in terms of how I'm going to evolve this, what path am I going to take. And in that scenario, as we see that whole fabric in terms of from a digital transformation point of view, stretching from the whole internal view from a collaboration, digitization of processes, analytics, into the external view of having the smart assets, smart buildings, smart centers, and then them coming together into a smart city. Because smart city in itself, it might be too big a problem to solve. Looking at it, saying is, how am I going to ever make my whole city smart and make it all intelligent? But the reality with this is you can actually start small. You can start by taking an asset, making it smart. I'm sure show you how that would work. And then taking a center that might be within your geographical space, making that smart, and then having those connected to each other till you eventually get to a smart city paradigm. Good thing is most of the things I was going to talk towards the end around the whole solution set has already been covered, so I've just left a little bit of time for that. Well, I'll skip through that. The key part of all of this is to have your architecture defined up front. And architecture is in terms of how does it actually scale up, all the different things you need as you evolve this. And to Stephen's point earlier, having that very open data platform is absolutely critical. Because all these things fall apart if things don't talk to each other. It's trying to organize a conference with people with 15 different languages all trying to talk at the same time. No one's agreed to what's a common language. The benefits wear off very quickly at that point. And it's no different in that ecosystem as things are moving through. And that's why we sincerely believe is that whole end-to-end. The value comes at the top end, is having those smart solutions about having facilities management, the whole scenario around smart waste and all those kind of things. But to get to that value, it needs to drive from bottom up in a consistent manner so that it can all talk to each other and it can get aggregated. And I'll show you one example of one of the case studies, one of the utility companies we worked with, the problem was all the things at the bottom end didn't talk to each other, and they were all giving data out in different formats, and we just couldn't make sense of it all. The other side is, I've seen the trend, which is more about people talk about the fact that we're going to have all these devices, it's going to cause a big data problem and all those things. In the past 6 months or so, in our experience, we've actually seen it's not a big data problem anymore, because there's a shift that's happened, or it's happening. It's a big data problem if those devices at the end, the edge devices, are dumb devices, and they're creating a huge amounts of data. But if they become intelligent devices, then what the amount of data that's being created is being pertinent to what you need. And then the analytics on top becomes different. So it becomes more of an analysis issue and being able to being smart about it rather than just a pure big data problem. One of the things is in our experience of going through this is just some of the insight I'm going to share was more about we've seen a pattern of behavior. When you deploy these things out, they kind of take a similar pattern. It doesn't matter what set you're using, they almost tend to take that similar pattern through. The pattern tends to happen is that you might take a physical asset and give it a digital fingerprint. It might be in any form that you would give it. Once you've given it that digital fingerprint, the digital world then starts collecting data about that asset. And as that data is being collected, you're then able to start creating meaning from it. What that means is that you might actually collect the data which might say, okay, these are the patterns of behavior that I'm seeing from a physical asset, which you may not have seen before. You might have seen is that on a particular Tuesday, a truck breaks down. Why does that happen? Because it might be because on that particular day, it's taking a different route or some of those kind of scenarios. If you can start seeing those patterns, the next pattern we see is the digital world then starts controlling the physical world. The reverse starts to happen because then the digital says, do not go there on a Tuesday because I know for a fact you're going to break down. Right? So it's kind of, that control behavior starts to come in that scenario. The other evolution we see after that is once those physical assets starts getting controlled by these digital universes which are creating these patterns, is they then evolve themselves out and they start interacting with each other. Where you can say it's a smart truck out there can actually interact with a warehouse and saying is, how do I actually supply in real time between those two? The reality is that pattern of behavior happens and it happens in a sequence. Trying to do at the other end without actually knowing what the pattern is, without actually collecting the data, you have the pitfalls that come in. And that's one of those important things to watch out for as you're starting on that evolution scenario. In the other side with this is the whole scenario which I've spoken about, the whole data standardization and being able to create meaning from it. One particular case study that we went through was with a wind farm operator in Australia. Sorry, I'm just multiplying back. So in this particular case, this particular green energy company had assets, wind farms spread everywhere in the world, from Australia to US, Germany, and all the different parts. The challenge for them was the operational and performance data that we were collecting from all these different wind farms across the portfolio was inconsistent and you couldn't really make sense. They had an army of people trying to massage all of this together and trying to understand what it actually means. And the problem with that was at any given time, it was taking too long for them to report on their financial performance and all those things. It was a great concept, like to start with, yes, we need to have all these wind farms and we put all those out there, but how to actually make sense from those things? So when you took it to the next level, it's more as creating, from the IoT perspective, is to creating that whole IP network and being able to collect the data and bring that together. It was important to actually understand what the problem space was. The problem space started off was the turbine generators that were recording this information were all recording it in a different format across different time zones and in multiple frequencies. Imagine that. And then you're trying to make sense of one's getting recorded every few minutes, another one's getting recorded every few hours, and you're trying to make sense of all those kind of scenarios. And the other side was multiple electricity output measurements per, at the different points. Because we said, we generated 5 kilowatts of energy. What does that mean? That was what the turbine did. But was that 5 kilowatts at the point where it got out from the generation farm? Or was it at the point where the grid accepted the electricity? You got 3 different data points now. And how do you actually make sense of which is the correct one? The other side of that is the whole, interesting, they had to report in Australian dollars. And every power company around the world which were buying their power was actually buying it in local currencies. Imagine that now. One, you're collecting it in all different time slices, you're reporting it in different formats, and then you have to actually convert it back into Australian dollar based on the exchange rate at that particular time. And the other side was the detailed performance analysis was only possible at the SCADA system levels, which is the control systems that each of these turbines have at that individual scenario. So you couldn't really bring it together. The solution to a large extent came back to is having that open architecture-based approach where you can actually absorb a lot of that data, being able to bring external data right around currency movements and all that. And also having the standard meter sets and saying this is what it means in each of those and that's our standards. And being able to pull that together into a format that then can be displayed out to people to make sense from it. Which effectively meant is that they could actually have a dashboard to report from. And that dashboard could actually, the CFO at any given moment could actually know how much EBIT his organization was earning based on the wind patterns in Germany. Now, oh, suddenly there's a hurricane coming through. Does that mean I'm going to earn more money? And that's the power, right? Now suddenly it's no longer about Internet of Things or anything. It's about having real-time visibility on how much every turn of the turbine is going to earn money for me. In their particular case, they actually had the ability to visualize data and all that, and reducing reporting problems and all those kind of things. There was an interesting point that came out of it. You know, with most of these turbines, they actually had subcontracted out to a maintenance supplier to actually come in and maintain these turbines globally, right? And guess what? They would maintain it whenever it was convenient to them, between 9 and 5. Once they started analyzing all this data, they realized actually some of those times when these maintenance engineers were coming in was peak production time for the wind turbines. So we were actually shutting the wind turbines down for maintenance at a time when it was actually the most important, I mean, they were earning the most revenue. So from a supplier management, they actually turned around and said to them, hey guys, can you please come in at a time when it's low production hours for us? And that was a change in behavior. And guess what? Immediately there's an increase in revenue by doing nothing other than asking your supplier to turn up at when it's convenient to you. I mean, I'm still trying to do that with my, plumber at home. It doesn't work, but that's, we're starting to try to fix that supply chain scenario. The other side, which is the most important for them, is being able to do investment portfolio analysis. What does it mean to have a wind farm in US versus Australia? What is my EBIT? What's my return on assets based on those wind patterns? You have your global wind patterns change from an El Nino to all those kind of scenario. Having that ability and to be able to predict that at a global scale, now you're actually bringing spatial data into that scenario. Now you see this is where IoT really makes that difference. You're having a different conversation. And this was a few years ago, so it's been operational. It isn't new, so it's not, I'm not talking about the future in any way, it's more the past in that context. Now I'll move on to the next stage. I've talked about the smart assets and being talked about. Let me talk about smart centers. And this is where Ookton being acquired by Dimension Data comes in, is the global experience that Dimension Data has had around the world of deploying the whole smart architecture across into different buildings and centers. One of the case studies we have is the Westfield Shopping Center, which was part of the London Olympics. Before that went live, was actually fully automated out, inside out, and all those scenarios. City in Malaysia. I had friends in here from Singapore, so I quickly removed the name. Didn't want to show up, intercity rivalry in that scenario. So some of those went out. The other one was the Greenpoint Stadium in South Africa, which was done in time for the soccer World Cup that happened in South Africa. So it's kind of some of this is dated. It's almost 8 years in the past. So we're not talking about things that you need to do in the future, right? It's already happened. It's been in production. It's been in use. People are actually gathering insights with a lot of these things. The other one is an aircraft engine facility and also the London Gateway. Now, they're all smart enabled. They're all got the sensors. They all make sense. You can actually control these things. And from any of the technology point of view, you might all be thinking, that's awesome. But from a business point of view, big deal. So what? What do I get? It's okay, I can control my light bulb from somewhere else, but where's my business value in all of those things? So I'm going to show you some scenarios in that context. And I'm going to show you a scenario in terms of from a Westfield Shopping Center, for example. If everything's connected and all things are, interacting with each other and you have a smart dashboard, you can see. Imagine a scenario. It's one of the biggest shopping centers in the world. A mother walks into a shopping center and loses her child. Can you imagine the frustration on the mother's face? And that is when the technology really kicks in. This is where the differentiation starts to happen. She can walk up to an information kiosk immediately, because everything's connected. The announcements can be made across all the scenario. The other side is all the general alerts get issued. All the display signages are linked. The photograph can be spread across the entire center, across all the floors in real time. This child is lost, if you've seen it. This is where it gets really interesting, the other part, facial recognition. In real time across all the video streams, facial recognition starts to happen to pinpoint where the child was at the last point. And the other point is then the old scenario is the cameras you can actually establish the master points and get those information out. That's where, sorry, thanks. That's where these things make a difference. I'll speed up now. Because I've been told there's a cricket match at 2:30. Not that I follow cricket. The other scenario is more about the terrorist alert in a smart center. This is where it really makes a difference. Think about it. We've seen these scenarios. Someone's going to attack a center, and so in a terrorist, you can actually have the central point informed in a few seconds, create the master points, and flash the master points out across all the digital signages saying, collect at this point. You can have the alarms triggered, the emergency rights door open in the right sequence, so that you can actually evacuate people from the building at the shortest possible time. Not only that, you start the facial recognition of the, if you can get the picture of the terrorists who's coming, you can actually start and scan that across your entire center. That's why this is what makes people safe and secure. It's not just about, driving them, fact is that you can do this and people feel safe and secure that this can be deployed is where it makes a difference. And then, of course, you can actually inform all the authorities in the time frame and get all that information out in a real quick manner. So I've spoken about this, so I've gone from an asset to a center point of view. To us, is around this is the smart cities we really see this as an ecosystem of all these things working together as collective of raising the tide for a city to become smart. And the examples I've seen is it's always, all this has been done to some extent in all those different pockets. If you take an open data architecture-driven format, which is what my colleague was stressing on at the start of the session, it allows this to happen because ultimately it is about the information. And the most important thing is about the information being context aware. It's being presented context aware in the context you're standing. It's almost what I would call a digital concierge. You walking up, what is your context? Based on that context, you get the information you need. I really don't need to know if it's sunny outside. If I'm sitting in the depths of a car park somewhere, can't find my car. My context is I'm inside the car park, tell me where my car is, and that, being context aware. It's one of the most important things in information in that scenario. And that's where it really becomes smart. And you can then assign, do specific local imperatives in that scenario. Now I know with some of these, the next slide I'm going to talk about was more the solutions. I had an inkling that some of my friends here would have covered a lot of these solutions that we have deployed globally in all the different parts to something. So I'm just throwing a few smatterings of these amounts. So smart roads was already covered off. The other side is around connected smart lights and all those kind of scenario. Think about the possibility, right? It's a light beam in its, a street lamp in itself serves a purpose to illuminate the road. Think of a different business model. You got all these Tesla electric cars and everything coming in. You know what the biggest threat to an electric car driver is? Running out of juice midway. Imagine if you can plug it into an electricity pole and power up your car. Suddenly all your electric poles have transformed itself into portable gas stations. And the city can actually make money out of it. There are different business models you're looking at, mainly because technology allows you to do it tomorrow. Actually, it's today. The smart parking sensors, that bit I don't really like that much, mainly because it allows you to get an infringement notice independent of having any parking signs anywhere. It's, I know, it just goes to a bit of extreme for there. The smart waste management is an ideal scenario. How often do we wake up on Thursday mornings or Wednesday mornings in every part of the city, having the garbage truck pull up and having to roll the garbage bin out even though it's empty? This is all about putting a garbage bin out only when it's full, and the waste truck only coming around when it's full. Look at the reduction in cost in just the waste management in that scenario. The times that's saved in those kind of scenarios. The last thing I do want to stress on is not so much the smart healthcare, it's a smart citizen program. All of us in this room, in some respect, are aware of the environment, what's going on and all that. We try and do the right things. Do we get rewarded for it? Who gets rewarded for putting the bins, segregating it rightly, putting the bottles in the right place and all that? Imagine if that could be tracked and you can actually get a reduction in your council rates because you did the right thing. And that's where the smart citizen program is coming, having a loyalty card for doing the right thing and being rewarded for those things. Last one. Thank you. My friend here promised me there were no sharp objects she could throw at me. This is my last slide. I'm saying is, yes, the journey is big. It can be challenging in all those scenarios. But with most of these things, start small and start early, but define the journey. Start with a solid architecture. If nothing else, when you get back, think about how you want to bring this together. One of the other things is, this is where, interestingly, we can have all the great dreams and try to rattle the cages. At some point, procurement people get involved, right? And so you can't really procure everything on day one, which means is you have to procure it in stages. And this is where this comes in. If you have an open standards-based architecture, when you have your procurement and when you're procuring these things, they actually will fit together. You're not leaving it to chance. And that's why if anything I would leave with is most of the things we're talking about from an IoT point of view, it's been there, it's been done in all other parts of the world. You can go out and see those things, but understand your context, set your architecture right, and evolve yourself into that space, having a standardized data platform. My preference would be base it on an open standard. Thank you.